Ready graphics? Ready theme? Cue it.
Good evening. For your information tonight.
We love your podcast, by the way, because it's not just a podcast that recaps episodes, but it's also a podcast that places the show in the culture and in the history. So that makes it unique in a lot of ways, and we really enjoy it.
Hi, this is Lauren Milberger.
And this is Jessie Mullins.
And welcome to a very special interview episode of the podcast, one that has been in the works for almost a year now.
Guys, we wanted this longer than you, believe it or not. And we knew you wanted it. And it finally happened. We finally sat down virtually and in person with
Diane English.
the real Murphy Brown.
In the writer's room, funny enough, at Kaufman Astoria Studios with Jessie by Skype.
Yeah.
And we had an amazing time. This is a 2-part interview. Please remember to listen to the second part.
As if we could talk to Diane in only one episode worth.
Yes, seriously. She was so lovely and so generous, and we got to hear really wonderful stories that I think you've never heard before.
Yes.
It was really lovely, and thank you, Diane, for giving us your time, and I think that all the listeners are really going to love the interview.
Yeah, we're so excited. It was such a lovely experience, and we both feel so fortunate, and we're sure you will too. So please enjoy our interview with Diane English.
Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Hello, I'm Diane English, and I am the executive producer and creator of Murphy Brown.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
This
Oh no, it's just this is obviously very exciting for us to actually get. We've spoken to you previously, but to actually get to talk to you in this medium is really exciting, and I know that our listeners got very excited when they found out who we were going to be talking to today.
I hope I'm not boring.
No way. You are at Real Murphy Brown.
Yeah,
There's no way.
We seriously doubt that.
We love your podcast, by the way, because it's not just a podcast that recaps episodes, but it's also a podcast that places the show in the culture and in the history. So, that makes it unique in a lot of ways, and we really enjoy it.
Thank you. That's very flattering. It's something that I know is the reason we wanted to make this, right, Lauren? Is for us, it really informed our culture, and it was so much more than just a series of antics. And that's why we wanted, our original goal was we just wanted it more on DVD, and then we got even more than we ever thought we could.
Yeah, we really wanted to just show how the show was still relevant, even though we knew that it was the music rights. We thought that maybe if we got the fandom going, if we showed people that it was still something that would resonate with people, that maybe some things might change.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, DVDs don't have it's not a big business anymore.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No.
So,
And I think when we say DVD, we mean streaming, really.
yeah,
but-
well, that would be
Yeah.
that would be great. That would be great. I know AT&T, which now owns Warner Brothers and all of its content, is starting a streaming service in about a year.
Yes, I
Okay.
saw that. But would you think that would really affect anything because of the music or not?
It's the phone company. They have pretty deep pockets.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anybody can afford that.
That's good to know.
That was always my greatest fear, was that I would grow up and work for the phone company, and now I am.
They found you.
I mean, that's not necessarily the first question that we wanted to talk about, but since we're in that subject, that's definitely something that when we ask people for questions, that was their big question. And I know there's been a lot of different information, but for people who are asking, can you explain to our listeners exactly what the issue is and why it's not streaming?
Yeah, the original series used one and sometimes two pieces of original music, either Atlantic or Motown. And we cut our opening sequence to that music pretty specifically. So we really can't replace it. So what that means is that a streaming service would have to repurchase the music rights for each one of those 247 episodes. Back in the day, you would buy the rights for broadcast. And there wasn't any streaming, and there wasn't any premium cable to speak of in any of those other platforms. So Now, when you buy a piece of music, it's easily 5 figures and often 6 figures for one song because you're buying it for every possible platform, even things that haven't been invented yet. So somebody would have to foot the bill for that. And, it might be worth it for a new streaming service to do that, especially since they own the content. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider the concept of buying the rights to a song in perpetuity versus just when it airs. That implication of ownership to and the ability to play a song and someone's music is a further reaching type of property ownership at this point.
Yeah, it's, the technology has changed so fast. So, like I said, now, for instance, we bought, for our first episode this season, we bought Sympathy for the Devil. And that cost us an arm and a leg. But it was our first one, and we bought it for everything. So, even if there's a chip in your brain now that's going to play music and television shows, we're covered for that.
Which, hey, who knows? We're living in a sci-fi kind of world, and I'm into it.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Going through the revival, did you know that you weren't going to be using any other songs going forward, and this was a way to sort of transition by having a song in the pilot, or was it just that particular song that you really wanted to use?
That was the plan. Warner Brothers and I discussed, the fact that it was kind of a trademark of ours to play a song at the beginning of every episode. We didn't do a theme, and that was, I think we were one of the first people to do that. But we didn't want to get stuck in the same situation. So, plus, the purchase of those rights now is really incredibly expensive. So the first one, just to market, and also the song was so perfect for that opening montage.
And also it gives you guys more time for dialogue.
Yes.
The shortness of the episodes.
Yeah, because we only have 21 minutes and 15 seconds now.
Yeah.
As opposed to 24 minutes, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the show. It really does.
Yeah, it's not good. It's like shooting yourself in the foot if you're a broadcast network. Because for them, it's like the last days of disco, They really have to figure out a new business model.
Yeah.
And shoving more commercials into a show is really, driving more people away because people are used to watching television now without commercials. They're watching cable, they're watching things streaming, they DVR it and they manage to, fast forward through things. So it does not make a lot of sense to just shove more commercials. And I know NBC is experimenting with a few less commercials, just charging more for them. And be interesting at the end of the season to see how that pans out for them.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that Will and Grace was 22 minutes. Not that that's a huge difference.
Yeah,
but
they got extra 45 seconds. That's, I mean, I'm in the editing room right now on our final episode, and there's a whole bunch of things that are going to have to hit the cutting room floor because if I had that 45 seconds, I wouldn't have to do that.
Have you thought of putting anything on the website, or is that something that they're interested in?
CBS Interactive does do that. We feed them things that we've had to cut that we really love, and they put it up on their interactive website. They've been collecting them.
So, collecting them. Okay.
Yeah, and then they'll do something with them. A bunch of them, though, I don't want them to use because I would like to recycle them into a second season.
Good.
It's the joke bank.
I've mentioned on the show, I don't know how many you have listened to, but that I have a collection of table drafts because I love the fact that there's extra information in them. And sometimes I'll see jokes that later on will show up in other episodes. Yeah. We used to have a bank. We literally had a jar. Oh, really?
And we'd cut it out of the script and put it in the bank.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So.
Oh, we love that. We love a visual like that. We're gonna have to remember that for our future jokes.
Yeah.
So usually we like to start with people's origin stories. So what is your origin story?
I was born. We'll start there. I was born in Buffalo, New York, Great Lakes City. And I just had this interest in writing from a very early age. I remember the first real praise I got from a teacher was an essay that I wrote when I was in second grade. And I thought, oh, that feels good, you know, to be pat on the head like that. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time alone in my room. I was a shy kid, and I would write parodies of, you know, novels like House of the Seven Gables, and then pass them around in school. And I just loved comedy too. So eventually, when I went to college, I was majoring in education, secondary education, to be an English teacher. But my heart was really in playwriting, and so I was early on part of the theater group at Buffalo State, and there was a fabulous man named Warren Enters, who was a very celebrated Broadway director and a co-founder of the Cherry Lane Theater, and he wanted to teach for a semester. And he wound up at my school, of all places. And we all fell in love with him, and he fell in love with us, and he stayed for 5 or 6 years, I think, and he was a great mentor to me. He really encouraged me to take my writing more seriously and move to New York. And I taught 1 year, saved up my money, and then moved. And then I wound up, my first job was in public television at WNET 13, writing copy. But then I moved into Theater in America, where I met people like Bo Goldman, who were writing plays, and they were being adapted for television. I really felt like that was the beginning for me. And then I got into the television laboratory, and that was a wonderful experimental place where they were making videos, guerrilla television essentially, experimenting with video, with small cameras, and kind of changing what you can do in television. And they got a grant to make the first movie for television for PBS, and it was called The Lathe of Heaven. It was an adaptation of a Ursula Le Guin novel. They hired a fancy screenwriter from Los Angeles, and they were weeks away from shooting and didn't have a script they liked. So they asked me to go put some notes into it, and I took it home and I rewrote it. It was easier than putting notes in a margin. And that's the script they wound up shooting, and I shared credit with that guy. And according to the Writers Guild, we got a Writers Guild nomination for it, and that was how I got my first agent, and I was off and running.
It's a lot of gumption.
Yeah. I guess that's all the stories that I hear, that how you do it is you just take an opportunity and go with it.
Yeah, it was just sitting there, you know, and what was there to lose at that point? You know, you're young and stupid, and you don't really know you're going to offend somebody. But
thank goodness. It's good to be young and stupid.
yeah, it is, actually. I mean, I moved to New York. I didn't know anybody, really, and just my brother, who's 6 years younger than me, and I got a U-Haul, and we drove together to New York to move me into a studio apartment. And when the U-Haul, when I pulled it up to the house, it's like all the neighbors came out looking at it, because nobody had ever moved out of that neighborhood. It was an old neighborhood, you know, families inherited houses and their kids inherited the houses, and it was like a spaceship had landed. And, you know, and we took a weekend and we moved me to New York, and I never really looked back.
Mm-hmm. I definitely know that feeling as a Great Lakes kid who moved to New York. I think I had one friend out here. And then all of that, including Lauren, all the friends I've made now are all from separate things. There's something great about New York that it encourages you to have a lot of gumption and be stupid, and you succeed for it.
It's great. It's you know, I think everybody should have 1 year here, sort of, you know. It's a very special, interesting place. It can beat the hell out of you too, you know. But I'm very excited to be back here and making the show here too.
Just going back to a little bit of what you were talking about before with your mentor, I've read a lot of you speaking of being taught indirect dialogue and how that was very important to your development as a writer. Can you talk to our viewers of what indirect dialogue is and how it's helped you?
Well, it's a way of expressing a scene without really being on the nose. So, for instance, I'm going to try to think of an example. If there's a couple in a grocery store and they're having an argument, maybe their relationship is breaking up, but they're not really talking about that. They're talking about how to choose a cantaloupe. And they both have different ways of doing it. I'm just making this up as I go. But that you can tell everything about that marriage by listening to them argue about how to choose this cantaloupe. And that's really the essence of indirect dialogue. And I really enjoy writing that way. Hard to do in 21 minutes. You sort of have to get to it, you know. But every now and then you'll see it pop up in our show.
When you say that when you were younger, and I mean, I know Lauren and I both have spoken about being the shy kids who found our way through art, found our voices. When you said you were the shy kid writing and you were drawn to comedy, what drew you to writing comedy in particular? Were there particular influences or writers in particular?
Yeah, I lived in a two-family house. My grandparents lived in the flat below, and my family lived above. And my grandfather was a hilarious man. And we loved having these sort of joke-offs, and repeating jokes to each other. We used to watch your show of shows together, which was a huge influence, and Ernie Kovacs, and we watched The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson together, Burns and Allen, and we liked to repeat the bits. And then I also had an uncle, who's my mother's brother, who was also like his dad, very funny. And I really enjoyed spending time with them. They were important male figures in my life because my dad was a bit of a problem. And, I mean, the definition of a comedy writer is somebody who had a difficult childhood. So rarely would you find somebody who does what we do and where it was smooth sailing. So I think that's where I got it from. I just really like to laugh. I've written my share of dramas, but it's not nearly as satisfying, and it's harder to make people laugh for the right reasons.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's sort of, we've talked about on the show before that comedy tends to be sort of I hate this term, but the redheaded stepchild. But it is actually the hardest to do, but it looks so effortless that people take it for granted, I think.
It takes a lot of dramatic intent to make comedy work. That true belief in the stakes of what is happening is what is funny, as opposed to just being going for the funny first never works. Finding that truth and the depth of that is what's really hard about good comedy. And one of the things I know that we love about the show. I was just listening to Dak Shepard's podcast, and he was interviewing Conan O'Brien, and they had a conversation about how few comedy writers were the class clowns.
Oh, yeah.
And how often people ask that, and that's not usually what happens. It's usually the shyer kid sitting in the back. It's the Eugene Levy quote from Waiting for Guffman. Was I wasn't the class clown. I sat behind him and I took notes.
Yeah, that's very true, and we do try to go for the truth first. I mean, if you read our outlines, they read like dramas, and it scares the network. It's like, where are the jokes? This is a comedy. But we do try to get the story right and the motivations right and the truth of it right. That's the big infrastructure, the underpinning of every episode. And then when you have 10 people around a table, they're all geniuses, these guys and women. Then the best funny stuff comes out of situations and behaviors, and especially when the cast is all, firing on all cylinders together. That's where our best stuff comes from.
Did you feel like you were entering a boys' club as a female comedy writer?
No, I've never felt that in any aspect of what I do. I don't know why. It's not like it isn't, but but I've actually never felt that, and I've never felt any kind of prejudice because I'm a female. As a showrunner, a writer, a producer, a director even, I've never felt it.
That's good.
I know you've referred to yourself as a unicorn
Yeah.
in this business.
Well, I turned 70 this year, so I'm executive producing a major network television series.
Yeah.
Who knew? You know, I may not be the only one, but I'm certainly one of maybe two.
Yeah.
So, and how about Candace? I mean, she just got a Golden Globe nomination today.
This morning.
At her age to do this, it's pretty great. It's pretty great.
Because we both run the social media for the podcast, we see a lot of feedback, and people are so happy to see Candace in the role. Not just because they remember her from their childhood, because to see a strong older woman really means a lot to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing for younger people to see too. And we got so much of that when we started up. You know, people, young women and men who watched the show with their moms. Who were very influenced by it. Marissa Mayer, who ran Yahoo, was interviewed by Chloe Mull, Candace's daughter, for Vogue. And she said, "You may not know this, but I watched your mom's show growing up, and it's what encouraged me and made me feel that I could run a company to see a woman doing what she was doing." I mean, we get this all the time. It's the most satisfying thing.
No, it must be.
Yeah.
And I think it's always amazed to see how the cross-section exactly is. You have people who would watch the show and want to be writers or actors, or people watch the show and want to be lawyers or politicians, and everyone took something different out of it, but it was the fact that it was a strong woman that meant something to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's satisfying. That's worth it.
So since we are talking about Murphy, and we've talked about the start of the show from different points of view, from what we've heard, from Grant talking about it, from Joe, from Norm. We would love to hear your point of view of the kernel of the idea and so forth.
How I got the idea, is that?
Yeah, well, what's the first memory for you when you think of how this started?
Oh, gosh. I remember sitting in my home office with a very antiquated now computer, word processor they called them.
Oh, yes.
And trying to finish the script before the writers' strike. And I have a very clear memory of that room, the chair, the computer. I even, as I typed the last lines, I had a Black Russian next to me. It was like 6 o'clock, and that was my drink at the time. Too much for me now, but and I couldn't come up with a title. I just was terrible at titles, and I had to hand it in, and I just typed the name of the character at the top of the page, and it stuck. But that's my first memory, is just sitting there in a chair, writing. I had a long form yellow pad, and I was writing character names, possible character names, and how they would relate to each other. I still have these pages.
Oh, that's great.
How would Murphy relate to Miles, and what did Miles think of Corky, and where was Jim's place in this, and all of that. It was almost like a Venn diagram, that I was making for myself before I started writing the script. And, those are early memories. And then, it was, who knew? You just do your best, and you turn it in, and you have no clue that it's going to turn into what it turned into.
And how close to the writer's strike did you hand in that draft?
It was handed in on a Friday night. No, sorry. I finished my draft on a Friday night. I brought in a couple of people like Tom Palmer and Corby, Danny Jacobson, to come to the house and help me punch it up over the weekend. And I got it in on Sunday night, and on Monday morning the strike started. Oof. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was, as it turns out, a good thing, because they had to make a decision at the network about whether they were going to shoot this pilot or not, or wait until the strike was over. And they felt like they didn't really have much else to shoot. So we went forward with it. We cast it, but it was scary because I knew I couldn't touch it. You know, I mean, there's always things you hear at a table reading that you want to change, and there's stuff that you want to rewrite. And we were going forward with this, and we couldn't do anything except cut for time. You could not write any new dialogue. And of course, I write very long, so we did a lot of cutting, but the network couldn't give any writing notes.
Oh, yeah.
They could only give performance notes. And with this cast, you know, you could give them anything and they would make it, you know, sound fabulous. So we shot it just as it had come out of my computer, except a little shorter. And that's what aired.
It's amazing.
So, yeah.
And won the Emmy.
And won an Emmy, yeah, which was pretty amazing. And it taught us a lesson, too. It's like, trust your first instincts.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a tendency, because you see your show being rehearsed day after day after day, that you start to think, well, that's not funny anymore. But you got to trust your first instinct. And that was a lesson learned. Because I think I would have changed a lot. Just because I could.
That's so interesting. Well, yeah, and I think there is something that's very Murphy Brown. Is just trust instinct, first thing, first thought, best thought. And you're right.
Yeah. I mean, our scripts do get better every day. I know the cast is always really eager to get their hands on the next draft the next morning because they'll see new jokes in there. Our scripts rarely go backwards. Which is not often the case with other shows, because we do so much work up front. We really put in the time up front, and we treat it as if we were all playwrights, you know. Yeah. And we started this season in Burbank for 2 months, pitching stories in real detail, the lines of dialogue, jokes that made it into the show that we thought of in May that are going to air, you know, next week. It's just it was a great group, and everybody's willing to do that kind of, you know, it's like digging a ditch, you know. It's nothing is on the fly. There's many outlines and notes and so on before we actually write a draft.
So we've talked to Grant recently about his audition story, which is one of our favorite audition stories because it's so specific and unique. Can you talk about it from your point of view?
Yeah, we knew how important that role was. They're all important, but, you know, we needed somebody who was a fresh face. We needed somebody new, and I had something really specific in mind, and casting kept sending us these sort of stereotypical nerds, you know, one after the other, too broad, too obvious, too, and we were really down to the wire, and we were really days away from having to start rehearsal. And Grant, I think Barnett had asked many times for Grant. He had seen him or heard about him. He was an understudy in Torch Song, and thought he was the right type, but somehow his tape never got to us. And we actually were about to go with someone else who's wonderful. He's a wonderful actor, Greg Gurman, who went on to Ally McBeal fame. And very quirky and so on, but he wasn't the guy I wrote. And we were so up against it that I was seriously considering rewriting the part for him. Oh. But I just woke up the next day and it was like, I can't do this. This is just not right. There's got to be somebody out there. Let's just take a couple more days. And we were all sitting in our production office figuring out what we were going to do next. And my memory of it is that his tape was playing in the background. There was a bunch of people on this tape. We put the cassette in, and we were having a conversation, not really paying a lot of attention, but just sort of randomly fast forwarding. And I think we all turned to the screen at the same time and saw him there, turned up the volume, and there he was. And Barnett goes, that's the guy I've been asking for. So we quickly flew him out. I know Grant was not planning to get this part, but he thought, oh, free trip, nice plane ride. I'll see my friend. I'll crash with my friend. He walked in and he read for us, and he was in a black T-shirt, black jeans, and motorcycle boots. But he was the guy. He just hit every note, and he was so cute and likable and smart. And we said, okay, we gotta get him now to the network. So we called the network. And we said, we think we got the guy. So we had to dress him because he didn't bring anything with him. So we got him the blazer, we got him the gray pants, we got him a pair of fake glasses, and he went in and he, in my opinion, nailed it. But again, they had in their mind that sort of stereotypical nerd guy, and Grant stepped out, and we said, "Listen, this is the guy. You got to trust us." And in those days, they would. If you earned your stripes with them, they would say, "Okay, let's give it a shot," because they always felt like you can go recast it if they like the pilot and they don't like him. So they gave us that one. They gave us everybody, actually. The only one who didn't go through that was Faith.
That's what we've heard.
And Charlie. So we went out and we said, hey, you got the part. Well, he was shocked. And he had to go buy some clothes. He couldn't go back because we were starting rehearsal. I do remember that they had put him in the Beverly Garland Hotel when he came out to read. And once he got the part, suddenly he was on a high floor at the Universal Sheraton with room service. So yeah, that was him. That's how we got him. We love him.
I think there's something so great about hearing it from Grant's perspective as well, because he still sounds flummoxed by
how he got that part.
Yeah, still sounds completely baffled but grateful.
Yeah, it changed a lot of lives.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and of course you also famously had a conversation when Candace left the room.
Yeah, that was a bit of an arm twist. Kimla Masters was the president of CBS, and he had a huge crush on Candace. He also knew that this was a show that could break out for a network that had not had a hit in 7 years. And they were the number 3 network, and there were only 3 networks. So they used to be the Tiffany network, and they were in a really very long drought. So they put a lot of pressure on the casting of the show. And when she came out, we, rehearsed her, and then we went to the network, and we were made to wait outside his office for 45 minutes. Ugh. I don't know what that was about. But as the time was ticking by, I could see her becoming more and more quietly upset, getting a dry mouth, wondering what that was all about. And by the time she went in, she had kind of lost her mojo. And Kim, demonstrated his electric closing drapes. I don't know why he thought that would impress her, but she was already pissed at him. And she did really a very inadequate audition after the build-up we gave her. And she knew it, and Barnett knew it, and so they, when they say thank you very much for coming in, that's the death knell. So they file out, and I just turned around and went back in, and I sat down with Kim and CBS's casting director, and I had a list of potential Murphys, and I said, show me one person on this list that if they're cast in this part, they would break out any bigger than Candace Bergen if she nails it. And I said, and I've seen it. I've seen her do it. I know she can do it. And this means as much to me or more than to you guys. Amazingly, they said, all right, and then Kim said, can I tell her she got the part? Okay, go ahead. And out he went, and he extended his hand, and the look on her face, I often describe as the last scene in The Candidate where Robert Redford sits on the bed in the motel room, and now he's the president. And that's really what her reaction was. And then we went out to a restaurant afterwards and had a drink, and I could see she was still reeling. And then Kim, at the upfronts, told this story, and he left out a really important part. He said, and she was terrible. And then you're waiting for him to close the circle, like, and now she's done it and she's brilliant, and he didn't. And then, Candace's publicist was the legendary Pat Kingsley. And you don't mess with Pat. And Pat was like, we're pulling you out of this show. They don't appreciate you. Mike Nichols weighed in, her friend, who are these people, she was very upset by that and felt kind of humiliated by that. And then he apparently wrote her this remarkable letter of apology that she shared with no one until she wrote her most recent book, where she printed the letter. It was pretty amazing. It still cost him his job. But
I didn't know.
Yeah, that and the fact that he hadn't produced another hit, so he was out, and off she went to be Murphy Brown, and many Emmys later, she certainly was. She was that person. Yeah. She was dying her whole life to be that character.
Yeah, she is. She is Murphy. It's been amazing to watch. I mean, everyone step back into these roles in the 11th season. It's just we were talking, and we, in our little revival episode when the trailer first dropped, was seeing, because we've seen Candace work since Murphy Brown, and we've seen her play all these other roles, but there's something about that moment when she sits down in that chair in that first teaser for the 11th season, and just the quirk in her face that is so Murphy, that exactly the voice that is going to come out, that is so just intrinsically her. And it makes sense why you fought for it, because it's magic.
Yeah, and for her, it's muscle memory too. Both of us became that character over time. I was writing it, and she was being it, and we kind of merged into this one person. She would often look up from a table read at a line of dialogue or a joke and just give me a look like, okay, I know you were responsible for that. She just had an instinct how to play this character that, the rest is history. She's remarkable.
I mean, do you also feel, though, that the two of you also, it's not that she was really great playing the character, but she really understood your writing?
Yeah, there's all of us really, the original writers, we had a rhythm and a tone that we all adopted, and she got it. All of them did. We didn't have much of a new series has to go through quite a few episodes before you hit it. And I think it happened to us around episode 6 or 7, where we really felt like we were clicking. That cast was so remarkable, and it kind of happened again. Everybody just stepped into their characters, but with different layers on them because they're older.
Yeah.
I love that Corky now she has a real feminist bent to her.
I love her.
I mean, she's just. It culminates in our 13th episode, where she wants to interview Mike Pence, and I won't say any more than that. But I love that about her. I love how Grant, as an older Miles, still has his insecurities, but he's learned how to deal with them. He's not that hysterical guy.
We've talked about that. Yeah, we love that.
And there's a wisdom and a life experience about the character now that we're all really loving, and everybody's got a different a new layer on them that makes it really fun to do.
Was that something that you all collectively really talked about when you were breaking the story, or did it just sort of come naturally?
It partly in breaking stories, because we would say, now wait a minute, how would Miles deal with that now, or how would Corky react to that now? But it wasn't until we got them all together and heard them saying the words that we started to really work that in a little bit more, all of that change. And especially for Murphy, now she's raised a fine young man, and she's a mom, and she's so attached to him. It gave her a nice, softer, gentler aspect to her character. She's still so flinty and fearless, but she loves him so much, and she's very protective of him, and I love their relationship. That's been, I think, the most gratifying part of bringing this back, is to watch that.
It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
We really love it, and I think the audience does as well, from what we can tell.
Yeah, and Jake is just, he can do it all. He's there was no question who was going to get this part. We were just so grateful that he came in for it, because he's really a movie star on the rise, and one of the hardest kinds of actors to find is somebody in their early 30s who looks like that, who's really funny, not just a reasonable facsimile of funny, but really funny and has great dramatic chops. He's got all those things. And when you think of the guys who can do that, you think about, Bradley Cooper and Ryan Reynolds and George Clooney, and it's almost to the end of the list, So we're very grateful to have him, and he's just a swell guy too. We love having him around.
Yeah, and he's believable as Murphy and Jake's son.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a Lowenstein lover, I will say I see a lot of Jake in his performance and in the way that he's being written right now. Yeah. Is that something that you have talked about? Is bringing his paternal side in?
Yes, we have talked about it. Didn't seem right for a first season. It's big, it's really big, and I think it would have dominated everything. I think we needed to really establish our people, reestablish them. But if there's a second season, I think there's a place we want to go with that.
Oh, great. And have you all discussed, because we've made our assumptions that he hasn't met Jake yet, but is that anything that you have or not want to talk about?
Yeah, we'll put that on hold, because that's still a big discussion in the writers' room. Yeah. So I'm not quite
juicy. I love that.
Sure how it's going to end up, but there's a lot to work out there.
Something that matters a lot to me, as you may have heard in in our podcast episodes, as well as on my mug today. I'm a big fan.
I made her that
Jim.
Mug. Oh wow, that's great.
It says Jim on one side and Jesse on the other.
Oh, that's great.
Because I love my dial. But I'd love to hear about what it was like. You talk about the fact that we had Candace, the movie star, who came in the original series, and it was such a big deal for a movie star to come and do television at the time. And then you had people like Grant and Charlie, who were theater performers at that point. What it was like choosing your Jim, and Charles Kimbrough himself. What was the choice like when you were looking for your Jim? What were you looking for, and what brought Charlie to the forefront?
Well, I mean, you've seen him, so there were again a whole procession of Jims who were just the stiff guy, the sort of, what was the name of the guy on Mary Tyler Moore, Ted Knight character, kind of caricature of an anchor man. And so we were looking for the authenticity and the comedy. And Charlie did little things like that little nose wrinkle he does, and the changing of the posture, and the voice. He could do the voice and then switch over from anchorman voice to actual person voice, and he showed us a lot of that in the audition. He was up against a wonderful actor, also a theater actor, named John Cunningham. And so, but there was just something about Charlie we all felt we didn't have to fight for Charlie. So that was his part.
Did you audition a lot of theater actors for the show?
Yeah, I went to New York repeatedly and saw a lot of people. And boy, in this iteration of the show, because we're in New York, we're getting great people.
Yeah.
Really great people. Doing smaller roles, but memorable roles, who are wonderful theater actors. So, but yeah, we came to New York looking for our main cast, and we auditioned a lot of people on both coasts and out of Chicago too.
She likes
Love
that.
Chicago. Love Chicago. I also saw in your history that you taught English.
Yeah, I taught English for 1 year, grades freshman through senior high school, and it was in an inner city school in Buffalo. A couple of my students had police records. It was a rough and tumble, school. But a good school, and it didn't have a theater department. They had never put on a class play. So I decided I was going to, try to get that together. So we got the band and the students, and we decided to do what was the least expensive version of Little Abner we could do, because they could make their own clothes at home, and the art department, the kids that were taking art classes did our backdrop, and the band was awful, but they got really good toward the end, and we had a couple of set pieces that had to be built. I had a kid in my class named Monte Carlo. That was his name, and he showed up with all these tools one day to, build sets. I said, "Where'd you get those tools?" And he said, 5-finger discount. I said, "You got to take those tools right back to the tool store." So this is what I was dealing with. But it was a huge success, raised money for refurbishing of the gym. And some of those kids went on to careers in the theater. One in particular who started a theater in Boston. So, but that was my year, and I just knew that was not, my mentor, Warren Enters, was telling me, you got to go to New York, And so when the year was over, it was a great experience, but it wasn't what my path was. So
Yeah. Do you find that year of teaching helps you as a showrunner?
Yeah, it's interesting because Danny Jacobson, great writer and co-creator, Mad About You, was on my staff on My Sister Sam, and he gave me a gift at RAP. It was a crystal apple. He said, "Apple for the teacher," because that was kind of my attitude in the room. And on my first series, Foley Square, Saul Turteltaub and Bernie Ornstein were my producers, and I learned everything from them. But they made me do warm-up once, because they said, well, one of these days on one of your shows, the warm-up person isn't going to show up, and you're going to have to do it.
Oh, really?
And they made me sit in the editing room with them. They made me do every aspect of show running so I could learn. And so I was so terrible. I got up there, and I was a teacher. So instead of doing jokes and patter, I was explaining how a show gets produced and how the cameras get loaded and people are falling asleep. And so that wasn't an asset. But I'm very grateful to those guys. Those guys really, everybody should have somebody like them in their corner when they first start out.
Yeah.
And rarely do now. People just get thrown into it.
Yeah.
And it's why a lot of stuff fails. There's no school
No,
to
there
go
isn't.
to.
Yeah.
So we want to obviously talk about the revival, but before we do, are there any favorite moments from the classic series or favorite episodes that you remember fondly?
Well, of course, the pilot has memories for all of us. That was an extraordinary experience. And I loved our Christmas show, Jingle Hell.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. The Brothers Silverberg is a favorite. Certainly, The Birth of Avery is a favorite. I loved our satire of the Nita Hill hearings.
That's a great one. Yeah.
I love that.
Talk about relevant, still relevant.
Yeah, and it's been on a 10 on TV recently, and a lot of people on Twitter have been commenting just how relevant it is. Yeah.
So yeah, those are some favorites, but I like them all.
I will say, as somebody who's currently in graduate school as a performer and an artistic creator, I during the Kavanaugh hearings had some friends over to watch that episode.
Oh, great!
The Nia Hill episode. Because we were all kind of talking about how do you tackle these issues and so on, and they've heard me talk about the podcast a lot, and a lot of them weren't aware that they knew someone who could help them watch the show, and so they came over, and it was a boon to a lot of people in my circle, knowing that there are ways to tackle these issues with comedy and with relevance, and I just want you to know that episode still hits a lot of hearts.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. That was a Peter Tolan episode.
Oh, yeah.
I do have a question that came out of our conversation with Norm.
Oh, yes.
He told us that there is an amusing story regarding Chet, your horse's passing.
Oh, God.
And that we should ask you.
Yeah, and he was our first interview, and he said, you have to ask her about this.
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, Chet, I got Chet when he was 5, and he passed away at 31. So he was really more than a pet. He was a family member. And his passing was really tough on me. And so, a large animal, what do they do with them? So they go to a place and that prepares these animals for their last trip. And they called me and they said, we're cremating him. Would you like his ashes? And I said, no, I don't think so, but I would like a piece of his tail and a piece of his mane just to keep. And so they said, fine, we'll do that for you. So about a week passes, and a Federal Express truck comes to my house in California, and the guy gets out and he says, I have a package for you. And I thought it was a piece of furniture that I had ordered. And the guy gets a dolly, and this giant box comes out, and he said, where do you want it? And I still thought it was the chair.
Yeah.
And I looked on the label, and the return address was the crematorium. And I went, oh, my God, it's Chet. Chet is now in my driveway. And because he left it there. I was going to just unpack it. And take the chair in, and now it's sitting in the middle of my driveway. It weighs 90 pounds. It can't be moved without help, and it was about to rain. So I now got garbage bags, and I wrapped it so that it wouldn't get wet. And I called the crematorium, and I said, I have Chet here in my driveway, and I didn't ask for him. And they were appalled, and as it turned out, 4 horses had passed that day, and one woman did want her horse's ashes. They got them confused, so she's waiting for hers, and I don't know if he's in there, her horses, I don't know what is happening. So now they apologized profusely, and they said, we'll send somebody right away to pick him up. The next morning, Federal Express guy comes back, but it's a different guy. And he said, I'm here to pick up a package. I said, it's right there. And he gets a dolly, and he said, wow, this is heavy. What's in this? And I said, if I tell you, will you still promise to take it? And he said, yeah. And I said, it's my dead horse's ashes. And he sort of stopped. And then he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. It was very sweet.
Oh, that's very nice.
Shout out to
Good
FedEx.
man.
Yeah. Anyway, he put the box in the truck, and I called them back and I said, okay, the FedEx has come and they've taken it, and so look out for it. But maybe you want to just give this box to the lady that is waiting for him. Well, how would she know? So
Yeah.
anyway, days later, a beautiful tail and mane
Oh,
arrived,
good, you did
all
get it.
braided with.
Oh.
They did do that, so I have
Very
that at
sweet.
home. But and I see that FedEx guy in my neighborhood every now and then, and he always waves at me.
Oh.
So that was my check finally comes home story.
Oh, what a good FedEx man.
Well, I have an animal-related story that I've always wanted to ask you about, and it's to the point of which I hope this is something I'm remembering correctly because I can't find it. But so I apologize if this is not true. But is it true that you accidentally took your dog's tranquilizer
Yeah.
once on the way to a meeting?
Yeah, it is true.
Amazing.
Because it sounds like a sitcom story.
And we made it into one. We made
Oh,
it
you
into
did?
an episode. Yeah, I had a very high-strung little German Shepherd mix, and there were trees along my driveway, huge pine trees that had to be removed because of fire danger. And so for days, there were guys out there with loud saws, and she was just freaking out. And I called the vet, and I said, "Is there anything I can do?" She said, "Yeah, we have this medication, and you can give it to her." And I had this ritual every morning where I would I have a whole basket of vitamins, and I sort of ritually go through and take each one. But her pills were right there. And so I was preparing to go meet with Ted Danson and Mary Steenburgen to take over their series Inc. And I had met with them already, and now it was a meeting with Jeff Katzenberg and Les Moonves.
Oh,
and
that I didn't know.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and it was at Jeff Katzenberg's house, and I had to drive from my house to Malibu, and I was just thinking about what I was going to say in this meeting, and I realized as I was putting the cap back on that I had taken one of those pills. And so right away I called the vet and I said, "What is going to happen to me?" And they said, "Well, it's probably not very much, but don't drive, and you'll just feel really relaxed." And it essentially was like a Valium, which I had never taken before in my life. So I get into the car and I'm driving, and I can feel it kicking in. And I don't take any kinds of drugs, and so I had kind of a big reaction. I couldn't feel my lips.
Oh, no.
And so I get there, and I had this big presentation, and I got through it, and they kept asking me if I wanted water, and I wasn't sure why, but I didn't eat anything. And then Ted walked me to my car, and he said, "Are you all right? You were so animated the last time we met you." And I said, "I have to tell you something. I accidentally took one of my dog's tranquilizers." So I got myself home, and anyway, they hired me, and I took over that show. But we thought it was so funny that we made an episode out of it.
Oh, I must have missed that one.
And Ted still says it's the funniest thing he's ever done in his life, where he takes the pill. Where Mary has a dog, and it doesn't like Ted, and she makes little meatballs, and she puts the tranquilizers in the meatballs, and he goes to her apartment because they have a parent-teacher meeting, and he sees meatballs there, and he pops maybe like a dozen of them. And, he's such an incredibly great physical comedian that it's one of my favorite episodes of anything we ever did.
There's a video of the cast of The Good Place teaching him recently how to floss. That's the dance?
How to do the floss
Yeah,
dance.
it's pretty hilarious.
He's really good at that.
Oh, he is hysterical. I love that man. So in the classic series, we talk a lot about the real life influences of storylines and different characters. And one of the real life influences and later people who join you was Linda Ellerbee. Mm-hmm. And I grew up a huge fan of Linda Ellerbee from her Nick News work.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear from you what it was like, any influence she brought in, and even her when she joins you later.
Well, Linda wrote a book about her experiences as a young journalist and being female among so many men, and it was just great. It was great research, And and the fact that she had a drinking problem too, so there was a lot in common there, and and I was just a big fan of hers anyway. So, and then we had her on the show, which was great. And I said, "You're going to play yourself," and she didn't know how to play herself. She's not an actor, so that was a little challenging for her, but. Yeah, she had a lot of good stories, and it was great to get her on. It was great to get her on.
There's a really great quote from the Chicago Tribune in '97, when in the later seasons, when Murphy gets breast cancer, Linda is now an amazing philanthropist for breast cancer awareness and research and funding, and she had already spoken years before about Murphy Brown and the parallels, and then she has this great quote in the Chicago Tribune saying, "Big mouth, booze, and now breast cancer. This woman has got to stop stealing my act."
I never saw that. That's pretty great.
Oh, we'll send it over to you.
Okay.
It's a lovely little chat.
Great.
Next,
On the Murphy Brown podcast, is there anything that they can do to let decision makers know that they want another season?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's a hashtag that got started now. It's called hashtag Renew Murphy Brown. And I think it would be great if people did that, hashtag. Because the network does pay a lot of attention to what goes on online.
thank you so much for joining us for part 1. Part 2 is going to drop on Thursday, which is the finale of season 11 of Murphy Brown. So you can listen to the second half of Diane's interview and then watch the finale.
I mean, that's a pretty good day. And while you're doing that, please make sure that you're following us on social media. And we are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Murphy Brown Pod. You can also find us on the website at murphybrownpod.com. You can email us with your thoughts and conversation pieces at murphybrownpod@gmail.com.
And if you like this and want more interviews and more episodes like this, you can drop us a review on iTunes. Just be sure to create a profile name under your profile and leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it.
So thanks for listening, and we'll see you for another episode of FYI.
The Murphy Brown Podcast.